Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life After the Military, a show completely focused on reversing the trend of veteran suicide by helping veterans transition from military to civilian life and strengthening the mental fitness of our active duty military members, veterans, and their families. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments Media, an organization on a mission to strengthen mental fitness worldwide for all. Go check them out at pivotalmomentsmedia.com to learn more. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen. And we are privileged to have Lieutenant Colonel retired Ken Patterson with us today. Ken served for 21 years in the United States Army. 4 of those included time as an enlisted infantry soldier, and the remaining 17 years as an officer. Ken's assignments included multiple tours as a G6, where he filled a Director of Communications leadership role. Howie had the privilege to serve with Ken in the 112th Signal Battalion Special Operations Airborne, where Ken excelled as the battalion logistics and supply officer and battalion adjutant. Ken has had a very successful post-military career in the medical logistics fields and now leads his own company, True North Advantage, which he started in 2021. Ken holds a Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Phoenix, and we're pleased to have him on the show today. Ken, welcome to Life After the Military.
Hey, thanks so much, Lee and Howie. I really appreciate it. The mission that you guys have is it's fantastic. It's needed today, and I'm really honored and humbled to be on the show today and be able to talk about my experiences, and if I can help even one veteran transition better, I feel like it'll have been a success. So thank you.
We're glad to have you, Ken, and I guarantee you your stories and your experience, that whatever you share with us, I guarantee it's going to help more than one. So we're really, really happy to have you here today.
Awesome. Yeah, Ken, I will echo those remarks from Howie, and I appreciate you bringing the mission to the forefront here, because it is our mission to curtail everything we said in the open. And every time we have a guest on this show, every show, it's an amazing opportunity for you and for us and everybody to learn, and especially you, the listening audience. And Ken, we're going to jump right into your post-service. So again, we said it, you served for 21 years as a signal officer in the Army, and you transitioned in May of 2012 to the private sector. Can you share with our audience how you planned, prepped for, and executed your transition to the private sector? And we're also interested to learn what went well, what did not go well. I always find we get a lot more information on that side to help people. And what would you do differently if you knew then what you knew now?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I loved my time in the Army. I feel like it was the place that I was supposed to be. And so I never thought about getting out of the military until I got a call from the Army, and I had applied for a 1-year extension in my last role, which was as a professor of military science at Rutgers University, running their Army ROTC program. And that's a 3-year job. But I really felt a strong need to see one full class go from freshman in the program through commissioning. And so I needed a 4th year to see that. I applied for my 1-year extension. I got it. And then I think it was day 3 of that school year, and there's kind of a very strongly worded rule in the ROTC command that once you start a school year, you're locked in. You can't leave because they need the continuity in the programs. So I think it was on day 3 that the Army called me and said, "Hey, congratulations on your 1-year extension. When this year is over, just figure out where you're going to put your family, because we're going to send you to Afghanistan."
Wow.
And so I had already spent 2 years in Iraq, and I was at this point now really starting to develop a strong relationship again with my family. I had missed a lot of my kids' lives, and it was just something that I really did not feel like I needed in my career to make my career satisfying to myself. So I ended up making that choice pretty quickly to submit my retirement packet. So I didn't have this plan, right? I mean, this came up pretty short notice that, hey, I've got 1 year left. And so that's when I started. It was a year out. The day that the Army approved my retirement, which then you have 1 year of service left, is when I really started. But I made it a part-time job. I focused on it every day. I put about 2 or 3 hours a day into the preparation for a year, right? That's awesome. So I knew going into it, and I had some mentors that I had talked to. I knew going into it that the most important thing was to figure out your resume, right? We don't need resumes in the military because we have OERs and NCOERs, and you have your ORB, and that's really your resume, or your enlisted records brief. And we all in the military know how to read that. Howie, you were a brigade commander. You could look at an ORB and in 30 seconds tell whether or not that officer or enlisted fit the culture of your unit. Nobody in the civilian world understands that. And so you have to work very hard to translate all of that military lingo and language that we understand like it's second nature into something that will be understood and comprehended in the civilian world. And so I ended up getting my resume professionally done. I personally, I recommend it. There are a lot of organizations out there that have specialties in military translation.
That's a great point, Ken. I don't think anybody's ever said that on the show. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Howie. Again, I never thought about going to seek out a third party to do a resume.
Well, so
That's
it's interesting.
idea.
So Ken, what I'm curious is, did you pay someone to do that,
I
or
did.
was? Yeah,
Yeah.
because I know there are paid services you can go to. And listen, we're going to find this consistently as we meet folks who have transitioned, a while ago. There are a lot of veteran service organizations that exist now that did not exist back then,
Right.
that do that as well and do a professional translation at no cost to the service member. So I think the concept Ken is presenting is spot on. I would just caution folks, unless you just want to pay someone to do it, there are veteran service organizations out there. And I'm happy, if you want to reach out to me, DM me on LinkedIn, Howie Cohen 222@gmail.com. I'll point you to several that I know that do it very well. But the concept is spot on.
Yeah.
Get someone to help you professionally translate it.
Yep.
It's just you no longer have to pay for it because there are veteran service organizations that do that at no cost to the service member.
The only reason I brought it up again is I just know from speaking to transitioning military, where do I start? What do I do? How do I do a resume? And I always like to just kind of pick Howie and Ken. I just like to pick up hey, there's someone who can help you with this. I always like to reiterate that to the audience. You don't have to do this stuff on your own. Anyway, Ken, I apologize. Back to you.
Well, and listen, I'll reiterate one other point. The beautiful thing about Ken just said was, and I applaud him for this, is he asked for help. Right. A lot of veterans today aren't willing or don't think to ask for help. And you need to know that there's an Army, a Navy, an Air Force. There's a ton of folks out here that will help you at no cost to you to help you, develop your plan and help you execute your plan. So do not hesitate to reach out and ask for assistance, because that's what they're here to do. And to be very frank with you, that gives them their sense of purpose, right? They want to help you have a successful, low stress transition. But anyway, back to you, Ken.
No, you're 100% right though, Howie. And it really does come down to knowing when you're outside of your depth, right? And it's okay to admit that you're outside your depth, and leaving the military and entering the civilian world was certainly something that I recognize as being outside of my depth of being an expert at. I did do a ton of research on resume writing services. I actually found one right here in Milwaukee, and it was $200. So very reasonable even at that point 12 years ago. And you're right, the resources that are available today just weren't there for us. We had ACAP, which was other than my CIF turn-in, was the biggest waste of time that I had in that time, right? It just wasn't, it was a check the block, I feel like, for the military 12 years ago to say we have a transition service, but it really wasn't.
Man, it's just not that long ago.
It was immature. It was, so ACAP is an acronym for if I remember, Army Career Alumni Program, which has now transitioned to the Transition Assistance Program. And depending on what installation you go to, it's basically all contracted out, right? So the value of that particular program is going to be dependent on the quality of the contractor who's running it. Every installation you go to, it's different, and some do it really well, and some it's not done very well,
But the organizations that are out there today, and how you promote them all the time on your LinkedIn page. I would also tell people, get on LinkedIn, look up Howie Cohen, look up guys like Jose Velasquez. There are people out there that will 100% put in time and effort at no charge to get you the right resources. And so LinkedIn is a tremendous resource for that. So anyway, I got my resume professionally done. I felt like it was translated very well. It took a good probably 3 or 4 months of going back and forth and questions and red lines and things of that nature to get it to where they felt it was right for the world that I was about to enter. And I felt like it told the story the way I wanted it to be told.
Ken, I got to jump in again, because this is an important learning moment for our audience. It took 3 to 4 months, not 3 to 4 hours. I think a lot of people sit down and go, I can get my resume done in a day. And look, if you've done resumes and you've been in the civilian sector, that may be true, but 3 to 4 months to get it correct, that should be a wake up call to everybody listening. Like, don't wait to do this. Sorry, I'm going to pick out those little things that I've noticed. Yeah.
Oh, it's a great point. And that's why I started on the resume. So I really had 3 primary efforts. I had my resume. I needed to create a plan for myself and write it down, like have a written down plan with, I really kind of did it like in the military, like a medal. I had specified tasks and I had implied tasks of, this is how our brains work, and it's how we organize our strategy development. And if you're not thinking about your transition as a strategic operation, then you're already not going to get the most out of it that you could. Right. If you just say, oh yeah, it'll work. It'll work out. I mean, I'm going to have a pension to rely on. I'm going to have my VA disability. I've got people out there that I know that I'll call. If you just think it's going to fall into place without you creating a plan, we all know that things work out better when there's a strategy behind them. And everything in life is a strategy.
Ken, I'll tell you this about, at least in my life, when things fall in place, which never happens, it's never a positive. It's like, oh, I got in a car accident again. I was going to the body shop already. That's when things kind of fall in place, right? There's never a time in your life where it's like, oh, everything just, I always say, if you catch yourself saying it'll be fine, that should be a red flag right there. Right there.
I blew my ACL. I needed to
I can get the other one fixed anyway. This is great. Yeah, it just it doesn't work that way. And like you said, you got to plan. You got to plan, which is an asset that military members know how to do better than most civilian people. It's not a shot at civilian people.
Yep, we've all seen a medal, whether we liked it or hated it when we were doing it in the Army. We all know what it means. And then my third effort was really to educate myself, like prepare myself personally. So creating a plan, the resume we talked about, my second effort was really around creating a plan. And this was really giving a lot of thought and trying to be as self-aware and introspective as I could to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to land. And it was really, I was getting out of the military, or had chosen to get out of the military specifically around my family, my wife and my kids, and the need to be there for them. And so it was important for me to include them in part of those decisions. My wife and I both came from the Midwest. We actually went to high school together. And so we knew that we wanted to get back to the Midwest. So geographically, we had an area of concern, right? An area of focus of where we thought we wanted to be. I do get into, the story around medical device and why I wanted to land in medical device. Is about the need coming from the military and 21 years in the Army, the need to do something that's bigger than a paycheck, right? And part of where I think veteran transition starts to derail is you have, I think you have 2 buckets in life, right? You have a money bucket and you have a happiness bucket. And it's pretty rare that you find a time when both buckets are full, right? And so you have to choose at times. Do I want to choose to fill up my money bucket? Because your happiness bucket might be a little emptier than you want it to be. And if you want to fill up your happiness bucket, there are times when your money bucket might be a little emptier than you want it to be. And it's trying to find that balance, right, between happiness and money. And it exists. It's there. I've made poor choices in my life where I've chosen the money bucket, and corporate America pays very well, but I in the end, it just wasn't the right place for me. And so I needed something that was bigger than that paycheck, something where I felt like I was making a difference in people's lives. There's organizations that have been created specifically for veterans that exist only for that reason. Team Rubicon is an organization that I would bring up, and that's the disaster relief organization. And they are there solely so that veterans have a way to feel like they're still taking care of the population, that they're still protecting and defending, and they have a purpose in life, right? And so having that purpose in life is a big deal, right? And so I knew where I wanted to land, and I knew what I felt like I wanted to do. And so that allowed me to have some kind of focus in my plan, some kind of focus for my attention, and where I was going to focus my attention in a more targeted approach, right, than just getting on LinkedIn and applying to every single job out there that was a senior manager job or a director level role or something like that. But having that focus and direction in a plan reduced a lot of my anxiety. I knew what I should be searching for. I started to get comfortable with the job descriptions because they were more similar. And I started to understand what kind of language I should be using in interviews, because I had this targeted approach, right? And a field that I thought I wanted to work in. And then really the biggest effort for me, and what I spent the majority of the 2 to 3 hours a night, every night for a year, was educating myself on what I should expect. So, I again, as Howie pointed out, the resources that are available today weren't necessarily available 12 years ago, but there was a website called theladders.com. Not that I'm promoting any other websites on your podcast, but it is.
Hey, just speak the truth, Ken.
Yeah.
Don't.
This isn't about us, man. Yeah, trust me.
It is a massive wealth of resources on every top. I mean, they have thousands of white papers, and you can read about anything: resumes, cover letters, interview techniques and questions, salary negotiations. And I probably, in that year, I probably read about 1,000 white papers.
Wow.
And took notes, and I had the notes correlated, but I wanted to make sure that when I went into the interview process, I was as educated and prepared for entering that process as possible. We do it when we do it in the military, when we get ready for a PT test, when we get ready for an IG inspection, when we get ready for a deployment. We prepare, we train, we set our objectives, we know what knowledge we need to impart on our soldiers, and we do that. And if we don't do that for this engagement, we're falling short on ourselves. And we should never say no to ourselves, right? But when you don't prepare, that's kind of what you do.
Hey, Ken, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in, because I really you're bringing up such important points that I want to continue to reinforce for our audience. Number one, as I continue to grow and mature in this space, I've been at it for a year, but really in depth at it for probably 6, 7, maybe 8 months, right? And something that has become so crystal clear to me is the absolute need when you're in the military. I don't care what service, I don't care what your rank was, I don't care what unit you were in, I don't care what you're doing, but when you're in the military, you're part of a community, right?
Yes.
And when you get out of the military, and again, I don't care if you've been in 4 years, 34 years, it's irrelevant to me. But when you get out, if you don't replace that community with another one, and I don't care whether it's a religious community, a work community, a hockey community, I don't care what it is. But if you don't do a good job of replacing that community with another one or several, you're going to have a problem.
I agree.
You are going to have a problem, and it's come out over and over and over again in these interviews. We did a session with the wonderful guys from the Skate for the 22. They created a community around using hockey to help people replace that community from the military. Right. The second is that you brought up is a sense of purpose. right? When you're in the military, again, I don't care what your rank was, what your position was, what your unit was, what you did. We all had, to some degree, a sense of purpose. And if you don't replace that sense of purpose with something, so if you don't replace the community, you don't replace that sense of purpose, you're going to have a problem. Yep. And it's fascinating to me that you figured that out on your own, right? And that's why you had the success you did. The third thing you did was, and this is maybe the most important one, is you absolutely owned the process, right? You didn't rely, and it's now like I can't tell you how many people I come across that just don't hold themselves accountable for owning the process, right? But you did, and you put in the work, and you did your homework, and you prepared yourself, you planned things out, you took responsibility, you held yourself accountable. And my experience is, when someone does that, in most cases, they're going to have a relatively low stress, highly successful transition. If they don't do that, they may still get where they need to go, but they're going to get on the pain train. And it's a question of how long do they stay on it, right?
It's a lot of pain, right? And then it just becomes, how long can you take the pain?
Right.
You know, it becomes a war of attrition at that point.
But you owned the process right from the get-go. You put in the work. And it's very apparent to me that you had a relatively low stress, highly successful transition, and have done well for yourself. And it's because you owned the process.
Let me ask you both this question. Again, for our audience that might be listening for the first time, I was a military spouse to my wife. So I had to assist my wife through her transition, but I didn't actually go through the transition of an active duty service member. And we've seen a variety of stories on the show of transition. So Ken, my question for you, and Howie, this is for you too, is it just seems like something clicked in you, Ken, of, okay, I've got to take the bull by the horns here and do this. Had a lot of people that it's just a last minute thing. And my guess is it's egoic in nature, not in a negative way, but just, oh, I'll be fine, like you said. So I'm trying to attack this on an emotional level, guys. Is there something, Ken, in your brain that clicked? And is there a way we can convey that to the audience? Maybe that's being stubborn. And I'm going to be very kind of blunt with that word, right? Yep. Of I don't need to worry about this. How do we have that person who may or may not be listening to this show, or maybe I run into that person, be able to say to them, listen, it's got to click that you got to do this. Or you're, like you said, you're going to be on the pain train. And by the way, everybody listening, no one that waited, as Howie just said, nobody that we've interviewed that waited has had a good transition. Not one person. In fact, plenty of the people that prepared didn't have a good transition, right? But it's a 0% effective rate when you don't. But Ken, just, and Howie, again, what is it that clicked? What went through? What was the thought that went through your head of like, I have to do this now?
So, and I'll be honest, and Howie, maybe you can confirm or deny. I would say that in that regard, in my mind, it does have a little bit to do with what you did in the Army. And to be honest with you, being a signal officer, right? Not in a signal battalion, but when you're a signal officer in a maneuver unit, right? And I was a signal officer at 13th Sustainment Command at Fort Hood, where I was a G6, and I was a signal officer in a couple other units. But when you're a SIGO in a maneuver unit, you're on your own. You either solve the problems or you're getting your ass kicked. But you have to learn how to be resourceful. You have to learn how to go scrounge. You have to learn how to solve problems and network, because that's the only way you survive, because nobody in the infantry battalion really gives a crap about the SIGO until the radio doesn't work. And then you become the focus of all of the attention. But you don't want to be that focused. So you learn these problem solving skills as a young SIGO, because you've been lit on fire in front of the entire dock, literally. And so that's where I learned how to be resourceful and make sure that I was always looking out for my good, to make sure that I was as prepared as possible to go do what I needed to do. Yeah. And I don't know if you have had.
Well, hey, Ken, so listen, I'm going to tell you something else helped you too, being an S4, man. Because when I was in 3rd Ranger Battalion, I was this first signal officer there, right? And Tom Baker was the S4. And we would always, so you're getting your ass kicked every day. If you're the S4, the logistics officer, you're the signal officer, you're getting your ass kicked every freaking day, right?
And I didn't even have the good luck of having Howie kick my ass. I had Tom Donnelly kicking my ass.
Oh my God. And Tom was a professional ass kicker, man. I could tell you stories about that. In fact, I will here if we have enough time. But anyway, being in S4, you know, Tom and I used to laugh about this all the time and joke, you know, you got to be I'll just say, you got to be a fucking masochist to be an S4 or a SIGO, because it's going to be nothing but constant. When the shit works, everybody's happy, but they never tell you. But when the shit doesn't work, or the shit doesn't show up, or whatever, the food doesn't arrive on time, or the part for the vehicle doesn't arrive, man, it is agony. It is pure fucking agony.
Well, it's the sports analogy, right? When the team wins, the players did it. When you lose, it's the coach's fault.
That's right.
You know, when that commander pushes to talk on that radio and it works, you know, nobody comes, hey, Sigo, great job.
Right.
It's when he pushes to talk and he gets freaking crickets, you know, it's like, where the fuck is a Sigo? You know?
Sigo!
Anyway, so it wasn't just being a signal officer, it was being an S4 that helped you too, man. I guarantee you know?
Yeah, but I mean, I think your experiences teach you, you know, based on your experiences, teach you how to be resourceful. And it's a self-survival, self-preservation,
right?
You know, in some of those roles, right? And in other roles, maybe you're a little bit shielded by that, where you don't necessarily have the need to be as resourceful or as concerned about self-preservation, because there's always somebody else preserving your life for you, right? So I think it is experience-driven, but that's where the network helps, right? That's where reaching out for help and asking other people's experience, and even just doing it on LinkedIn. You know, I mean, I've seen posts out there where one veteran says, hey, I'm getting ready to transition and I'm not sure what I'm doing. Can I get help? And you know, within a week, there's 250 comments. Right. I mean, there's resources, there's links, there's PM me. I mean, there are so many people that look on LinkedIn every single day just to look for that post, just to find that post. That it's incredible. And people just need to raise their hand and say, I need a little bit of help.
Yeah, I think that is the key right there. And to get back to your question, Lee, I think it is ego, right? My experience, it is ego, right? Especially if you're a more senior enlisted or officer, you just think, hey, I've been successful. I got this, right? And then they find out they don't. Now, if you're a junior officer, a junior enlisted, then it's the question of, am I willing to ask for help? And so it's not as much ego; it's as much, you know, I don't know what to do, and I don't think to ask for help, right? And that's why I encourage, you know, anybody. You know, it's not a sign of weakness; it's a sign of strength. There's nothing wrong with raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm a year out, I'm 2 years out. And listen, obviously once you know that you're getting out, the sooner you start to plan, prepare, and do. And here's the other thing, right? Now, here's what it was for me, right? I knew my career was over, right? I went through my looks to make general officer, didn't get selected. And at that point I said, cool, all right, I'm good with that. I'm not going to hang around, you know, and try it both when I'm not in my best. You know, I had a zone where I had good looks, right? Once I got out of that zone, and I've seen people do this, they keep hanging on and hanging on and hanging on. It wasn't that important to me, right? So once I got out of that zone for my most competitive look, I said, okay, cool. It's time for me to move on. And now what am I going to do to take care of myself? And it gets right back to what Ken said. What am I going to do to take care of myself and take care of my family? Because that became my priority. What am I going to do to take care of myself and my family? And that's not from a selfish point of view. I said this all the time in my command philosophy, right? Because we're taught early on as a leader, you know, you take care of the mission, you take care of your people, right? And you always put yourself last. You get on the chow line. You're in a chow line in the field, right? As an officer, you better be the last fucking person in that line, because if food runs out, you're the one who's not eating, not your troops, right? I mean, we're taught that stuff as early on as a young officer, as a young NCO. And unfortunately, some people take that to the extreme that they're getting out of the Army and they think, I am so critical to this mission this unit is going to fucking fall apart if I don't work right up into the last fucking day of my time on active service, right? Well, guess what? I learned as a young second lieutenant from my first sergeant, my headquarters company first sergeant. A quick war story here, right? A young E4, he was the awards clerk in the battalion PAC, the Personal Administration Center. He came up on orders to Hawaii, and I just happened to be sitting in the first sergeant's office. I'm a young second lieutenant. And this young E4 comes in and says, "Hey, first sergeant, I just came up on orders to Hawaii. I'm so excited." And, "Hey, great, man. I'm happy for you." He says, "Yeah, but I don't know what the battalion is going to do." The first sergeant looks at him and says, "What are you talking about?" "Well, I'm the awards cook. I'm leaving. What are they? Who's going to take care of the awards?" The first sergeant looks at him and says, "Hey, son, you're like a hand in a bucket of water." And the kid looks at him like confused. He says, "First sergeant, I don't understand." He says, "Son, you're like a hand in a bucket of water." And the kid just didn't get it. He says, "Look, if you put your hand in a bucket of water and you pull it out, what does the water do?" He says, "It fills up the hole." He says, "Look, you're a great young soldier, but I guarantee you the Army will find someone to come in to replace you, and he or she will do a great job, and we're going to miss you, but the awards section will do just fine after you leave, because he says, we're all, me, this officer over here, we're all like a hand in a bucket of water," right? And so you learn early on that you are not irreplaceable, right? And the sooner you accept that, so that when it comes time for you when your time comes, I'm getting out, the Army will replace you. So start planning and preparing and executing your transition plan.
Yeah. And really, if you're truly a great leader, you should be able to step away from your unit, and that unit should be able to continue mission.
That's exactly right.
I was just going to say that. And we see that
you're
in
exactly
sports
right,
too.
Ken.
We see that in sports too. As a coach, just to equate this to sports for everybody, don't get me wrong, wins are a great way to show success but that's not how I've ever defined success, right? Aside from making sure that the players and the team care about what I'm trying to teach, it's the sustainability of that after I leave, which is the real success to me. If I leave and it falls apart, I'm devastated.
Yeah. Or if you're a player, right? It's next man up. Right. If you're in the field of combat and someone gets wounded or God forbid killed, it's next man up.
Right. Again, in sports, I always say everyone is very tradable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Whether you realize it or not, most athletes, not all of them, but most athletes are very, very tradable. Yeah. Because they're all providing the similar aspect. Anyway, let's take it back from sports and back to the military. I apologize.
Well, I think it comes down, and that's like the conversation we just had. It's all about ego, right? I am so important to this organization. They can't survive without me, or maybe it's just, this makes me feel so good.
Well, yeah. And Howie, I want to say this too. And Ken, to your point, look, I'm a very proud, supporter of hiring veterans, right? I do that in my own businesses. Right. I'm very proud about that. But if you don't reach out as a transitioning military, you might not be where I'm looking for an employee. We talked about these sites, Heroes Linked and hiremilitary.com and on all these places where vets go. If you're not doing your research, you're not going to be there for me to find you.
That's exactly right.
You know what I mean? And so you might be looking, you might be outreaching, but I'm actively looking for you. I'm actively looking for you as an employer. And if you're not there, right, so that alone should remove the ego of, oh man, I got to get on this site, because there are resources there. But I wanted to bring that up because ego will keep you from doing that. I won't even see you as an employer. Not that I'm important to hire, but you know what I'm saying? Just there's places for you to be.
Yeah, great point.
Hey, so in the interest of, and listen, we can go on probably for a lot longer.
Let's do it. Four more hours of this. We'll have a 4-part series. Yeah.
Meetings right now.
Well, hey, so listen, in the interest of moving on though, Ken, look, you've worked in several different private sector organizations, and I really enjoyed kind of, looking you up on LinkedIn and seeing what you're doing. And obviously, Lee brought up and you actually mentioned it, that you've worked in the healthcare industry since it looks like about May of 2012. I'm interested to understand, you kind of touch on it a little bit in terms of a sense of purpose, but let's talk about what attracted you to that area. And what I really would be interested in is just sharing, how you transitioned into that, how you integrated into that, and how you achieve a level of success. Because we've talked about your transition out of the military. Let's talk about your transition into the private sector and how that went and what we can learn from that for others who are about to go through that.
Yeah. So great question. Also, I'd mentioned that I had 2 deployments to Iraq, and I'm gonna try not to get emotional here. On both of those deployments,
hey, it's okay, man. I've had Lee's had to pick up my butt and carry me for a while based on some of the conversations we've had. So don't worry.
My dad had a heart attack on both of my deployments, and I bear some level of responsibility. I mean, my dad would never say that, but I know that it put him under a tremendous amount of stress. My dad and I have been best friends my entire life. I mean, we talk every day.
That's awesome, man.
We did before I left, before I deployed, but being deployed, I got 1 satellite phone call a week, and 99% of the time it wasn't going to be to my dad. It was going to be to my wife, and so she would relay a lot of the messages, but he didn't get to hear my voice. And so after the second deployment, when I got back home and I was on my R&R leave after integration, we went down to Florida to visit my parents. He had a cardiology appointment, so I went with him. So we went in. I wanted to thank the cardiologist because he had put 7 stents in my dad's heart over those over those 2 heart attacks, and my dad was still with me and is still with me today, and those stents are rock solid. And so I went in and I thanked the doctor, and I was pretty emotional about it. And he's like, "Would you like to see the surgical suite that we did the surgery on your dad and implanted the stents? I can show you how we did that." I'm like, "Yeah, that would be awesome." So we went into this surgical suite, and it was a GE healthcare, a GE cardiac surgery suite. And he walked me through, he showed me the stents and how they're implanted through the artery in the leg. And I, in a way there, I decided this is what I want to do. And
wow. That is so cool, man.
Yeah, I started interviewing at GE Healthcare. At the time, it was right here in Waukesha, Wisconsin. At the time, they weren't hiring. They were in a hiring freeze, which I've found out that corporate America does pretty regularly to conserve their Q4 numbers. So, I interviewed with the vice president of global sourcing, of procurement, and about 5 minutes into the interview, and this was a tough guy to interview with. They called him the godfather of sourcing. He had been the VP of sourcing at GE Healthcare for about 9 years. And he's like, "Hey, have you ever, what do you want to do at GE?" I'm like, I think I want to do manufacturing. I mean, I think I want to make something. I want to, use my hands and create something tangible. And he's like, "You ever think about doing sourcing?" And I'm like, "No, I mean, I don't even know what sourcing is, really." And he's like, "I think you'd be really good at it." And I was like, "Well, now I'm interested. Like, you hooked me already."
He made you an offer you couldn't refuse. He's the godfather of sourcing.
That's right. So, he's like, "Ken, you got the right personality, and you're engaging, and you're a little bit magnetic in how you tell stories." And he's like, "I think you'd be really good because sourcing is all about relationships. It's not about the negotiation. It's not about the science behind developing a procurement strategy. It's all about relationships. And if you have the relationship, you can get anything done." Right. And I was like, "Well, that sounds great." And so he called me back a little while later, and he had a business unit, actually, the X-ray business unit, that had a CEO, and I won't say his name, but it was very tough to work for, and was very hard on his procurement guys, much like a lot of infantry battalion commanders are on their SIGOs.
I'm telling you, you got to be a masochist, man.
I had the experience going in. And he had gone through 4 senior sourcing managers in 3 years that couldn't work for him anymore.
Wow.
And so Ralph Strozen, the vice president of sourcing, is like, "Listen, I need somebody that can just come in and work for this guy and not quit for 2 years." And I'm like, "That's me. Like, I'm that guy. I'm either dumb enough and strong enough, but I can do that." I mean, if you're going to keep paying me for 2 years, I'm not quitting. And so,
yeah, I can do anything for 2 years, man.
yeah, that's easy. So I took the job as a senior sourcing manager for the X-ray business. And literally 3 weeks later, I was in the CEO's basement with him in Shorewood, Wisconsin, drinking wine and playing pool and talking about his exploits in college. And him and I became tremendous friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
We did.
Did you beat him?
What's that?
Did you beat him at pool?
I don't remember. We had a lot of wine.
He's not as competitive as you, Howie is.
I know that I did. His house is massive. And so when I was heading there, he was texting me directions. And so we were texting back and forth. And then when we got there, he had to go to the bathroom. And so I got on my phone and I texted my wife and I was like, Kathy, holy fuck with this house. It's incredible. And so that was it. I didn't get a response back from her. The CEO and I finished up our stuff. And as I was leaving, I was going to text my wife and tell her I'm on my way home. And I open up my wife's text, but that text isn't there. And I had actually texted that to him. I'm like, holy shit, sir, I'm really sorry about that. I mean,
That's awesome. That's how you won him over right there.
Yeah.
Come on, Ken. You know you did this on purpose, right?
Exactly. And in honesty, he's the one. So he left GE and went to Medtronic to be the CEO at Medtronic Diabetes, and he called me and pulled me with him at Medtronic Diabetes. But I when I interviewed with him initially, he only asked 2 questions, and he said, his first question was, "Tell me why I should not hire you." And that just floored me. I'd been on the ladders for a year. I had memorized and studied 1,000 interview questions.
Right.
And that one didn't come up. And so, I kind of looked at him and I was like, man, that's not a great interview question. And he's like, I know, that's why I ask it first. And I was like, okay. I'm like, listen, if you do hire me, I mean, you're going to get to know me. I'm honest. I'm transparent. I have no hidden agenda. So let me just start by saying, I really don't know what sourcing is. I don't understand GE Healthcare, and I have no experience at GE Healthcare. I don't know medical devices. I don't know the FDA regulatory environment. I don't have a strong business acumen. I don't have a strong financial acumen. And I looked at him after I said that, and I was like, I don't even know if I'd hire myself at this point.
It's a great answer.
And he kind of laughed, and he's like, I don't think I've ever heard a more honest answer to that.
That's what the point of that question is to see that if you have that ability to tell the truth.
Yeah. So
my other favorite one, Ken, real quick, and I used to, everyone seems to get this wrong, is they say, well, what's your greatest weakness with this job? Right. It's a similar question.
Yep.
And I'm looking to see if people are going to kind of BS me. Yeah. Right. And it's funny because the answer that I look for as an employer, I used to give this when I was being interviewed, was I want someone who has a long-term goal and knows they don't have the experience to get there. And that's the thing that they mentioned. Like, I want to be here and I don't have the experience, and this job's going to give me the experience. That's my greatest weakness. That's a great answer, right? But a lot of people go, well, I have problems waking up. I don't show up on time sometimes. You shouldn't say that, No, but I love that he floored you. There's always the one interview question no one's ready for. Yeah, and I got one time. Would you rather use a pencil or a pen? Like, what kind of a question is? Go ahead. Yeah. Use a computer.
His follow-up question was, "What do you bring to the table? Like, why should I hire you?" That's awesome. I was like, "Listen, I'm like, I don't care who you have on your team and how long they've been there. I will build a better team. I will lead them better, and I will outwork every one of them. I'm like, my team. Give me 2 years, and I will win awards. We'll win awards."
That's
and
awesome.
He's like, you know what, Ken? He's like, I can teach you all of that shit that you said you don't know, business acumen and GE and med device and X-ray. I can teach you all of that. I can't teach you how to do what you just said you bring to the table. And so he hired me, and that was in 2013. I started, and in 2016, my team won an award from Jeff Immelt, who was the CEO of GE at the time.
Oh, son of a gun!
For organizational excellence. Yeah, and so the CEO, I was about to say his name. The CEO had already left and was at Medtronic, but I called him. We stayed in touch, And I was like, hey, I got my award. He's like, yeah, you're full of shit though. You said you were going to do it in 2 years. It took you 2. I was like, damn it.
Why?
But you know, it was the same as the military, right? When we bring new second lieutenants in, you know, I used to tell my lieutenants at Rutgers, you have 3 things that you're responsible for: look like a leader, sound like a leader, and do good PT. Like, just be able to PT your ass off. If you can do those 3 things, you're going to be a great second lieutenant. And don't worry about what you know or don't know, because you have NCOs, you have sergeants and non-commissioned officers that have been there for 17 years. They'll teach you, and let them go to them and seek that knowledge, because that's how you develop that relationship.
What great advice. And it's the same thing in the business world, right?
But in the business world, I had a team, and I had a guy named Mike Riley that had been on that team for 15 years. And I put they gave me an office. I took the cubicle next to Mike instead of an office, because Mike was my guy. And I'm like, let's take this wall down between our 2 desks, because I need to be able to see your face 10 hours a day, and you need to teach me everything I need.
And listen, what you did then too is you sent a huge message, not only to your team, but to everybody else, that you ain't the most important guy around, and that you want to be a part of the team, not just in charge of the team, right? And so you were sending all kinds of messages, whether you realized it or not. But that's because of the type of individual and leader you are, man. You know, so good.
Yeah, but the military,
that's an awesome story, Ken.
Yeah, so that's why I landed where I landed, and I had the success I had because I relied on my teams, and I trusted my teams, and I learned from my teams. And you know, there are, again, the network, right? The network is out there. Howie, I introduced you on email to John Conklin, who's the guy that I was mentoring through ACP. Mm-hmm. He just took a job at GDIT.
Oh, good.
And so he's got an internship at GDIT. And so in our last conversation, I was like, hey, you know, I got one of my best friends is a VP at GDIT, Chuck Daly.
So yeah.
Chuck is the VP of ARMA now. And so I called Chuck, and I'm like, hey, Chuck, would you be willing to mentor this guy? He could use a connection within GDIT that can help him out. And so now him and Chuck are talking every other week, and they love each other.
Hey, do you know who started ARMA?
Yeah, Todd Schweitzer.
Do you know what he sold it for?
I don't know what he sold it for, but I know. All
right. So let me. So just for the audience here, right? So I'm commanding the 112 Sigma Battalion. At this point, Ken is either the battalion S4 or the battalion adjutant, right? So either logistics or personnel. And I had a young second lieutenant in Bravo Company. 112 Sigma Battalion, Becky Margiotta, who we interviewed earlier on in one of these podcasts, was the company commander. Todd was one of her platoon leaders. Todd was a little freaking pit bull, man, from New Jersey. You know, we immediately connected because, you know, we're both from New Jersey. We spoke the same language. We could get into a locked car with, you know, just a coat hanger, right? So Todd got out of the military, and he went into government contracting, did a couple jobs, ended up co-founding a company called ARMA Global down in Tampa, Florida. Was a government contractor. Now they had 2 arms. One was IT focused and in the special ops community mostly, and the other was aviation focused. Again, and the whole realm of government aviation. But they built a freaking empire as a small business, and make a long story short, Todd and the leadership sold that company to GDIT for $250 million.
Oh, wow.
He created generational wealth.
Sure did.
For people who were in that company. So Mark Clifton, as you know, Command Sergeant Major Clifton, who was First Sergeant Clifton back then, actually Sergeant First Class Clifton, who was running the Panama detachment, right? And then was a B Company First Sergeant. He was the BD, the strategic business development guy. So Chuck Daly is part of that, you know, obviously came along a little bit later on down the road, but that's fascinating.
They're all still down there. AC Coley is down there.
Oh yeah. AC. Yeah. Well, so Mark started his own company.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So when you get acquired, and you probably know this, when you get acquired, it's very typical that they'll keep a certain percentage of the leadership team there to help with the integration into the larger company. Right. And then they normally mandate you're there for 2 years. Well, literally, he won't say this, but I know this. At the 2-year, 1 second mark, Mark said, I'm out of here. And he started his own company called Space Systems.
Yep.
And as soon as AC, and again, we interviewed Mark and AC. I don't know if you watched that podcast, right? But we had AC and Mark on, but AC, he retired after a magnificent career in the military. Okay. And then went to work as a government civilian for the SOCOM, the U.S. Special Operations Command, J6 Directorate. He worked there and had another career as a GS civilian. Retired from that, and then Mark yanked him in and brought him over to Space Systems. So you got Space Systems down in Tampa, and AC and Mark are working together down there. Yeah,
that's great.
Isn't that cool?
So
yeah,
I still stay in touch with all those guys also.
Yeah. I mean, listen, man, it's a brotherhood. You know, it's an absolute. Look, I love Ace. I think I've told the story before, right? I was coming out of command of the 112 Signal Battalion, and at Fort Bragg there was the 35th Signal Brigade, which was the core Signal Brigade. So that was the overarching signal community at Fort Bragg, and normally the brigade commander would have 2 formal events, in the summer and in the winter, and invite all the signal corps, whether, regardless of what your rank was, who you were assigned to, you were invited to come to these 2 formal events. And so I was on my way out of the 112th, and just so happened I was still there for this summer event, and I'm sitting at the table next to AC and his wife Teresa, right? And I had the movers coming, packing out my house. And so it was Maria, my wife, me, AC, and then Teresa. No, I'm sorry. I was sitting next to Teresa and then AC next to his wife. And so I kind of lean over to Teresa and say, hey, Teresa, I just want to let you know, I just think the world of your husband. I really do. I mean, I love him as much as I love my own brother. In fact, maybe even more, And but I'm going to tell you something, right? We got the movers at our house right now. And I'm heading up to Northern Virginia for another assignment. And I just want to tell you, if AC doesn't come home and he's missing for a few days, don't worry. I just packed him away in my household goods, and I'm taking him up to Virginia with me, So I got him. I'll take care of him, man,
We'll get him home eventually. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, listen, I'd love to move on because what's actually fascinating to me, and the reason I want to ask this question is, you started your own company, right? So you obviously have an entrepreneurial, bent to you, and I would love for you to share, the step you took to stand up and True North Advantage. Talk to our audience, because look, folks in our audience may have an interest and may be entrepreneurial themselves and may have an interest in starting their own business. So I'd love for you to share what motivated you to start that business, the steps you took to stand it up, and what your focus is with True North, because I think that could be beneficial to folks in our audience.
Sure. So True North Advantage, I have a partner. His name is Raj Jadhav. He right now is full-time student at Stanford, getting his MBA. So he's doing 21 semester hours.
Wow.
At Stanford, and so I get to talk to him for about 20 minutes a week. But he graduates in June, and then he'll be full-time True North. So I'm an army of one right now. Wow. We've worked together for about the last 8 years. So he was just a sourcing associate when I met him at GE Healthcare, on a different team that had a pretty crappy leader. But I saw something in him that was different than everybody around him. And I liked him, and I wanted to work with him. So I went to his manager, who was a peer of mine, and asked for him to be assigned to support my team. And so she did that. But her poor leadership was eventually going to cause him to leave GE. So I started a petition to get him, just to have him on my team. And so that eventually, it took about a year of persistent kind of nagging of the VP, but eventually he gave me what I wanted. I got Raj on my team, and we just absolutely crushed it. Our leadership styles balance each other almost perfectly, where I'm very high level, big picture. He's very detailed and in the weeds. And so we have this great balance, and we can have extremely open and honest conversation about each other, about shortcomings, about disagreements, and it's never personal. We just get through to a solution. And then I brought him with me to Medtronic. He was a director for me at Medtronic. And so we've been together for a while, and we've always seen the same kind of systemic supply chain issues in the supply bases that we manage. So procurement is, procurement is that field where we buy all of the stuff needed to make the product, right? So if you think of your Apple iPhone, Apple only makes the iOS, the software. They buy the glass from a company called Corning. They buy the electronics from a company called Jabil, and they bring all of that into an Apple factory, and they load the Apple software on it, and out goes an Apple iPhone. That's what we do for the medical device industry, both for GE and for Medtronic. So I managed about $1.8 billion a year in total spend across all of our product units. So all of the products that we made. But the problems in those companies that we buy stuff from, so I had about 3,500 suppliers that my team oversaw. They were the same. We saw the same, and it's kind of this way across all the manufacturing space. They're very under-resourced. They're underappreciated, again, much like being a CIGO, right? So my experience in the military leads me right into knowing what to do. But they're under-resourced, underappreciated, and things just are always there until they're not there. And then there's a bitch session, and then things get fixed. We always thought that there was, we always thought that there would be so much more benefit if companies would just build out their sourcing functions and really man them appropriately, that they could be so functional and so much more impactful on a company's bottom line by negotiating better deals, by negotiating better prices, selecting better suppliers, all of that stuff. And so we weren't seeing that. One of my passions in life has always been mentoring and developing others. So I just translated that into mentoring and developing my suppliers. So I would probably spend 50% of my time at my suppliers, working with their C-suite leadership and developing them into the supplier that I needed, because I didn't have time to fix the problems, 2 layers deep. I needed to fix the problems at that level. So I just didn't see the problems at my level. And about 4 years ago, Raj and I started talking about, man, we should just do this for a living. Like, we should just quit corporate America, start our own company, and just go mentor and develop.
Yeah, so you're you're a consulting firm then, where you're that's brilliant.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
And I'll tell you, and I freely admit this as I wouldn't call it a character flaw, but it was always my fear, right, that held us back. I always wanted to own my own business. I always wanted to do my own thing, but I felt like I needed that steady, reliable income. I felt like, I have a family, and I can't afford to take a risk at the age of 48. I'm way too late in the game to take a risk like that. So it was always my fear. I took a new role at Medtronic, where I moved up to corporate, and I took over a pretty big responsibility. And I was told that I'd build a team, that I'd get 6 or 8 resources, and I could build a team, and here we were a year later with no team. It was still just me. And it was really a struggle. My boss had expectations, and they were fair expectations, but they were fair expectations for a team of 6 or 8. Not a team of 1.
So they weren't willing to make the investment to help you build out the team, Ken?
It wasn't that they were willing. I think my boss fought. I think everybody wanted to. I just don't think that the resources were there. I just, I don't put blame on anybody.
Yeah.
The resources just weren't there. This was a new role that they created for me. So it was a new organizational structure. And again, I loved my time there. I don't badmouth, everything I learned there was a total blessing to me. There was great leadership. It just ended up being a situation that wasn't going to change for me, that needed to change.
Yeah.
And so if it was going to change, then it was me that had to change it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I walked away.
I think when we reconnected, you had just assumed that role.
Yes. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, and then all of a sudden I see you're starting your own company, man. Right.
Yep.
So I think when we reconnected, you had just kind of gone into that role,
into the corporate role. That's right.
Yeah.
So I walked away from corporate America without a plan, but with confidence that I'd figured out. My wife my wife came back from the dog park that morning. The conversation with my boss happened in the morning while she was gone. I heard the garage door go up, so I walked outside with my arms up, and I'm like, I am unemployed. And so we went day drunk. We went day drinking that day. So, but it's weird because I wasn't stressed. I knew I'd figure this out. I wasn't really yet thinking about entrepreneurialism or starting a new business. I called one of my buddies who's also a veteran that was at Medtronic, had left Medtronic, and was now the vice president of operations at a startup, medical device startup. And I just called him to BS with him because we both had a lot of the same stresses and challenges while we were at Medtronic, and called him up and we were talking. I'm like, so how's it going there? He's like, man, it sucks. He's like, I'm supposed to be building a manufacturing facility and a manufacturing line, and I'm doing your job. He's like, I'm doing supplier selections and contracts and negotiations. That's where I'm spending 80% of my time. And I was like, dude, hire me. Like, I'm available. I'm a free agent, man. Hire me today. And he's like, we can't. It's not, we've got investors, we've got venture capitalist investors, and it's not in the budget for like 2 years to build out the functional areas. And I'm like, sucks to be you then. Have fun with that, dude. And he's like, I could hire you as a contractor. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, how would that work? He's like, I'll send you a requirements document tonight. You send me a proposal, and we'll see if we line up. And so he sent me a requirements document. I talked to a bunch of friends out there that do this stuff and do consulting work on how to price things and how to price myself. I sent him my proposal, and he sent an email back that said, put it in contract, let's go.
That's very cool.
And so that night I got on LegalZoom.com. I formed True North Advantage. I got on GoDaddy.com and bought the domain name. I called my partner at Stanford. I'm like, hey, I started the business today. Do you still want to do it? And he's like, I want to do it. And so,
that's awesome.
That's how quick it is too. To make a business does not take long.
It happened overnight. Some of
the best businesses are like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The next day I got a graphic designer to start work on the logo. I thought I knew what I wanted. I wanted a name that wasn't just Patterson Consulting. I wanted a name that mattered in the military. In navigation, true north is your cardinal direction. If you know true north and an azimuth and distance, you can get anywhere in the world you want to get.
Very cool.
And then the Toyota model of business, which is kind of the standard for lean manufacturing. True north is also a defined term for the Toyota model, where they say that it is the optimum direction.
That's your vision, right? I mean, this is where we're headed. Right?
It's the perfect direction for a business to head. So True North seemed like the right way to go. We've got 4 clients now, and I'm negotiating a statement of work with our 5th. I'm hiring 2 people. They're both going to be veterans.
What a great story, man.
So yeah, we're moving out, and I'm working harder than I've probably ever worked, and I have zero stress.
And I bet you're loving every second of it. I bet you're loving every second of it, man.
I love every minute of it. Yeah, it's great.
Ken, in the interest of time, we only have minutes left, and I have to get this part of the show out of the.
Hey, Ken, I don't know if you've listened to any of our podcasts, but this is one of my favorite parts of the show.
So, awesome. Ken, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to ask you the final question. It'll have to be maybe a 2-3 minute answer, but you've proven today your mental fitness is super strong. But as is commonplace on the show, I give every guest a name of a book. So if you were going to write a book, I have picked the title out for your book.
Awesome.
Right, now, Howie, you're going to like this. I have never had this many names to choose from before. All All right. So, and there's a few of them here. I'm going to go through the funny ones first. So my first one for you is I can do anything in 2 years or for 2 years. I can do anything for 2 years. How you said that one. The next one's a little bit of a shock name for a book, but it's Where the Fuck is the Ciggo? That's going to be the next one. All right. I also love that you said, look like a leader, speak like a leader, and PT your ass off. That was a good quote. But I think for you, and like sometimes these take more of a serious turn, and the funny ones are there. But I love your statement of I'm more than a paycheck, the strategic operation of transition. That was kind of the one I came up with you. But I love that because I think that's so true that you're more than a paycheck. I think it's really important that people realize that you do need money to make the world go round. That's not a understatement at all. But you have to have purpose. You have to be happy. The money has to lead you somewhere, and you have to lead to the money. It doesn't go one way. And that kind of leads us to our final question, Ken. And again, it's almost kind of like a 2 minutes or less type deal. But Ken, look, Pivotal Moments Media seeks to strengthen mental fitness worldwide. We all struggle with it at times due to varying degrees. If you're willing to share, have you struggled with your own mental fitness? Have you seen others struggle with it? And if so, could you tell us about, your experiences and what you do to manage those challenges and how you strengthen your own mental fitness on a daily basis?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the most impactful question you could ask in this interview, right? I mean, it is something that we all struggle with. And I have also, when I struggle with it, for me, it comes down to my wife. My wife is my sounding board. She keeps me grounded. She's completely transparent and honest with me. And she can tell me, when I'm off, she knows, she can see it. And then we have that conversation. For maintaining my mental fitness, for me, it's about keeping a schedule, right? I mean, in the military, things are very regimented, and that's kind of what you get used to. And so I wake up at 5:45 every day, and I do that 7 days a week. Monday through Friday, I spend a little bit of time with my son in the morning before he goes to school, and then I go hit the gym. And on the weekends, I get up and take my dog to the dog park and run her on Saturday and Sunday. But 5:45 is my wake up time, rain or shine. I've found that if I skip this, it does start to affect my mental state. Some of the things that I do intentionally, I schedule 30 minutes a day of white space thinking, where I shut off all my electronic devices, silence my phone. I take a sheet of paper because I'm old school and a pen, and I just let my mind run for 30 minutes. And the topics completely vary. I keep all my notes, but the business model for True North was one of those 30-minute sessions, but I've also planned family vacations in those 30 minutes. So it's wherever my mind wants to go, but I just give my mind 30 minutes a day to run at its own pace on its own topic with no agenda.
Very interesting concept. I love that, man.
Yeah. I mean, and some of the ideas that I've come up with, I mean, a lot of them are just moronic and just could be burned and thrown away. But there are a couple gems in there, that are like, wow, that'd be a great vacation, But no, Ken, we shouldn't shave mohawks at all the kids' heads. That's a bad 30-minute session, buddy. And then, my last thing, I intentionally drive my schedule. And I even did this at corporate America. And so one of the ways that I do that, I try to keep some space in between meetings. I try not to be back to back to back.
Right. I think that is absolutely critical, man.
Yep. And it allows me to digest what I just met about. And I try to do a quick AAR in my head of how did I do in that meeting? And can I do better in the next meeting? Was I short? Was I too long-winded? What can I do better? I also mentor a lot of people. I mentor people still from my time in the Army, people from GE, Medtronic, people in our local community. I'm a senior mentor for the varsity high school football team on leadership.
Very cool.
I'll go and spend time with the football team. So I have developed a habit of scheduling those mentoring sessions on Fridays.
Very cool.
These mentoring sessions, man, they charge my battery so much. They energize me. And so it's a little bit of a selfish way that I get to choose the way I end my week and start my weekend. And so my Fridays, tomorrow, I've got 7 mentoring sessions scheduled for tomorrow, but I know all my other meetings, my hard meetings are done for the week. And I just get to talk to people about their leadership ability and their professional.
I love this. I absolutely love this. Hey, and for our audience, man, if you haven't figured this out, we're talking to a true servant leader here, right? Someone from the very minute, he entered into the military to what he's doing now has always been about not only making himself the best he could be, but how can he impact others around him, help them be successful, because he knows if he can make the people successful around him, then ultimately he's going to be successful and the organization he's a part of is going to be successful. That's awesome, man. Good for you.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thing. And I think mental fitness, Howie, you said this earlier, you talked about leaders eating at the end of the line and, always looking out for everybody else. But I know that I remember learning from you when you were my battalion commander, but a leader has to spend time taking care of themselves also, because if the leader falls apart, everything else falls apart with it. And so this mental fitness game, this strategy is important, because if you're not strong, mentally strong, your family suffers, your workplace suffers, your friendships suffer, everything just starts to crumble. Right. And so being that center kind of fulcrum of strength, right, around those things that you have to do, and it's different for everybody, but you got to find the things that charge your battery and then put those things in place, and I put them on my schedule, like they're in my on my Outlook calendar.
Good for you.
Because if I don't, then I'll forget about them, or I'll do something else somewhere else, but if they're there and it's intentional, then you'll put the effort into it.
Well, hey, listen, I completely agree with you. It became part of my own personal philosophy is you have to take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, because if you take care of yourself, then you're better able to take care of others. 100%. If you don't take care of yourself, you don't attend to your mental fitness, your physical fitness, your emotional fitness, your spiritual fitness, if you don't attend to those things, you're not in your best position to take care of the mission, the organization, and most importantly, the people that you're leading. So absolutely spot on, Ken.
Awesome.
Ken, you've been a great guest. I think we're going to just wrap this thing up. It's perfect timing. But you've been wonderful. I've enjoyed every second of this, as always. And there's so much knowledge you dropped here for the audience today. And that's the whole purpose of the show. It was our goal at the start, and I think we accomplished it.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you, Lee and Howie. I am deeply humbled to have been a part of what you guys are doing and a part of the mission. And if there's any way that I can help, please let me know.
Hey, you're doing it. Just you're on the team, man. Awesome. You're on the team. You're doing
great.
it.
We're humbled as well.
You, Howie. I've got some other folks that have transitioned very well, that are strong mentally, and I think they'd be great guests as well.
Awesome. Cool.
We'll make it happen. And again, we'll put your information with the show too. So
thanks.
You have been listening to Life After the Military, which is powered by Pivotal Moments Media. We hope that you received value from this podcast. We know we did. And if you did, subscribe to it. Rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening, and please share it with others to get the word out. And again, you can learn more about Pivotal Moments Media at pivotalmomentsmedia.com. Take the time, check it out. Look at our other channels. It's all about mental fitness education. We have a whole mental fitness education center there with inspirational, educational content. It is a mission that we are on, and we hope that you'll join us on it. So for Howie Cohen and Ken Patterson, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. Thanks so much for listening.
Dominate the day.